Hello, and welcome again to the Inking Out Loud podcast. On the table for today's discussion is Calamity, the final volume in Brandon Sanderson's young adult trilogy, The Reckoners. I'm your host, Rob Santos, who's off to a great start, of course, and joined by my co-host, Drew McCaffrey.
How's it going, everybody?
And returning special guest, Lauren McCaffrey, Drew's wife. What's up, Lauren?
Hey, how's it going?
Now, guys, that ending, this entire final installment, like, what are we thinking? Drew, I want to start with you, broski. I want to get your sort of general impressions. Like, how did you find this book?
This book was an interesting reading experience.
Interesting.
Through the first, 2/3 of this book, I was, the first time I read it, I was just 100% on board. I was loving it. I was like, this is one of the best books Brandon has ever written. It's on track to be even better than Firefight. And then that ending just fell flat.
For you?
It is the only book I've read by Brandon Sanderson that didn't have an awesome climax. It is, I think, one of the most problematic decisions he made. And I get why he did it, because he's got this Apocalypse Guard ancillary series that he wants to write, and the end of this set that up. But because it's an ending that needs a further series, an ancillary series, to flesh out and explain fully everything, that doesn't make for an effective ending to a trilogy. I mean, it's unsatisfying. For the first time, a Sanderson book left me unsatisfied.
What about you, Lauren? How did you find it?
So, I'm a lot more positive.
Oh, okay. I'm going to be
general.
somewhere between you guys, I think.
I like, with Sanderson, how many answers we get for the powers. And I always like how he, not necessarily that he gives us all the answers for every series, but there are answers, always. There's a reason why powers are the way they are. There's a reason why weaknesses are the way they are, and everything ties together. I like that.
Yeah, as Kelsey
Maybe
likes
the ending,
to say, there's always
maybe
another
the ending
secret,
could have been better.
Right? Okay. So, and I've mentioned this a few other times throughout the course of this podcast, but I found that I honestly liked this volume a little more than I remembered liking it. I mean, between the three in the series, I've probably read Steelheart 10, 15 times, Firefight half of that, but I remember leaving Calamity with a sort of kind of vague disappointment the first time. It was definitely a very ambivalent feeling, though, because, I mean, there was definitely there's a lot to like in this book, and, clearly a lot not to like, Cody, but I specifically remember feeling a bit unsatisfied. I'll say unsatisfied the first couple times I read this book, and I think this is my fourth time reading this book, and granted, a lot of those feelings, they still linger, but I'll get into why later. But I have to admit that the sort of deeper dive that we did for this podcast, that I do for this podcast, it really opened my eyes a bit. I have a lot more positive things to say about this book today than I have previously. I'm not going to be probably glowing about this one like I did with Steelheart, but I definitely want to discuss everything I appreciated this time, with a more thorough look. So, I'm pretty excited to get the ball rolling here. So, do you guys just want to start, opening up with some first impressions? Start with, Sanderson's style, how we felt like it fit for this installment here?
Sure. And I think the beginning of the book is a really good place for that, because it starts with a really good sequence. When they're stealing into the Nighthawk Foundry, and we get some fun action sequences. We get a couple of creepy little things in there. We get vintage Megan and David. It's a good example of how Brandon has improved on his pacing over the years, where you compare how Calamity opens to how Steelheart opens, for instance, where there's a very short little prologue scene with a little bit of action, and then it takes a while to get moving after that.
Did you say
Whereas this one just
the prologue
hits
in
the ground
Steelheart
running.
was short? That was the longest prologue of all of them, wasn't it?
I mean, relatively speaking, but like the actual action scene in that is just like a little punctuation
I
mark
suppose.
at the beginning of the story, and then it jumps in time to David, and then we have this long ramp up before we really get into the meat of the story. Whereas this one, we hit the ground running.
We do.
We have an extended action infiltration sequence. We have real character development connecting back to the end of the second book with Megan using her powers, and we find out, well, she conquered her fear in that one instance, but she can still succumb to it, in the future, and then we move pretty quickly from Nighthawk, and there are negotiations with him, and then out to Ildithia, and I mean the book is just, it moves along at a fast clip, which I like a lot. It's one of the reasons why I think it was on track to be one of his best books until the climax. So.
Yeah, I agree a lot about that climax. Following what I said a couple of episodes ago for the first volume, I want to hear what you think about that first line. David's trademark terrible metaphor. All right, the sun peeked over the horizon like the head of a giant radioactive manatee. What'd you think? For both of you.
No.
No?
No.
Lauren, what do you think of these terrible metaphors? Are you like me and you like them? No?
So he's inconsistent about it. There's one he has about fire where he gets it perfect. He's like, oh, like the dying embers of a campfire. I'm like, well, that's not a messed up simile here,
I actually have a few points specifically about that, how David's kind of internal narrative actually does have a few really, really badass ones, but the ones that come out of his mouth always seem to be like terrible. It depends if you like that. I actually, for some reason, and we've said this a million times before, we'll say it a million times again. For the most part, Drew and I find Brandon Sanderson's humor. Lauren, I don't know, I haven't spoken to you too much about Brandon's humor, but we kind of feel that it's less than subtle.
It's a little cheesy.
It's a little cheesy at times, for sure. Cody being one of my most hated characters of all time, we'll get there. But for some reason, and I can't explain why, I love these metaphors. I love them. And these are the kind of things that normally I would hate when I read a Brandon Sanderson book. I love his plot. I love his characters. I love his penchant for spectacle. But usually his little character quirks, I should say, do drive me nuts. And for some reason that I can't figure out, these metaphors don't bother me. I love them every time. That opening line, the sun peeked over the horizon like the head of a giant radioactive manatee. I don't think I've ever had an actual chuckle on the first sentence of a book ever until this book. And I actually did chuckle the first time I read that. It kind of felt like a welcome like a welcome back, I don't know. I liked it. Go ahead.
I think I laughed the first time, maybe, and then this time it's been kind of like, oh, well, here we go. All right.
I don't know. I'm partial to those. Although if I have actually a confession to make, honestly, the first 3 times I read this book, when I read manatee, for some reason I thought of a stingray. And I don't know why. It took me until my 4th read and I realized, oh, wait, no, manatees are the big, fat, round ones. I was just thinking like a stingray. I was like, oh, the clouds are diffusing the sun. It's kind of like going out and the curtain. No, it's a big old fat water mammal. I totally forgot what the hell a manatee was until now.
Mermaids. They're mermaids, remember?
Yeah, they're big ugly mermaids. So, yeah. Anyway, what about the rest of the humor? Did you find like the situational humor? Did you find like, for example, I liked Nighthawk's not Nighthawk's. Technically, it was David's language filter on his phone. I got a kick out of that. I loved it.
That's hilarious.
Right?
I love that.
Drew, Broski.
Yeah, it's all right.
Oh, Drew.
Hey, he doesn't have to like everything.
I wish
sorry,
I knew somebody who cursed like that, and I had a filter. I would love to do that. It's so much better than the cursing. Like.
Yeah, I mean, how many times a day? And we're gonna censor this. How many times a day do you see a? I mean, in a written word on Facebook, on YouTube, I see it. Oop! One just slipped out. I see it hundreds of times a day. Seeing somebody say, "Hold on, I'm taking a koala." Perfect. Loved it. Such an unexpected little turn on that phrase.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah,
I thought
that's my favorite.
Brandon Sanderson being able to curse without actually having to curse, I kind of like how he worked that in there. It felt a little, little magical.
Yeah, I mean it's better than some of his humor for sure. But
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I guess this savage glee when Sanderson decides to occasionally get crude, and it doesn't happen often. I'm actually, in fact, I'm on another read through of Oathbringer right now, with the audiobook at work, and I found a few moments with Vale that I somehow keep forgetting about. No spoilers, of course, but I just want to say that when Sanderson does decide to get crude like that, he does it perfectly. And maybe I'm thinking that's probably why he doesn't do it too often, because he waits until it's perfect, and then he kind of dips his toe in the water there. In every case, I feel like it's absolutely justified.
It's like I don't, without going too far, off topic here. There are a couple of moments in Mistborn Era 2 in the Bands of Mourning where he's surprisingly vulgar, and it hits home with a little more like you consider like a scene like that versus Kane, where vulgar is the name of the game in Kane. Like it's what you expect, and in Sanderson it's not what you expect, so it can kind of blindside you a little bit and give you a little more of a chuckle than you would otherwise have. But
I wouldn't have found any of that funny coming from Stover. None of it.
Yeah, exactly. So I have a question for you guys, though, moving kind of away from the humor and into the setting.
Hit me up.
So each of these 3 books is pretty focused around, for the most part, a single city. And each city has, defining characteristics. We have New Cago, we have Babelar, and now we have Ildithia. Which one of those 3 was your favorite setting?
I'm torn. I did not like the setting of the third, Ildithia, the city of salt, the city that keeps moving. I was bored by that. I didn't like it. But I liked Steelheart as a book more, but I think I liked the setting in Firefight more. Babelar was just the glowing fruit, the water, the dawn's lights, roots holding up the buildings. There's something about the aesthetic of that. I think Firefight is my favorite setting, if maybe not my favorite book.
Lauren?
So I really like Babelar, obviously, same reasons, but I think Ildithia is kind of fun with the artistry, like the vines that come in on the buildings and how everything changes all the time. He doesn't describe it as much, maybe, as Babelar, but I imagine it being really cool, because these buildings don't last, and you're constantly, I don't know, seeing change, and it's kind of cool to me.
What about you, Drew?
Babelar is my favorite by a mile.
Yeah.
I think it's the most dynamic setting. I think it has the most going for it in terms of what the story can do in it and with it. And I think just like in my mental, image of it, it's so cool. It's this series is one of those situations where it's most obvious that Brandon Sanderson, so how these 3 laws of magic, he's got things about how like the limitations on magic are more interesting than the magic itself, and then stuff like that, and it's better to extrapolate on what you already have versus pull something new out of midair and things like that. But then he also has what he calls the 0th law, and that is simply err on the side of awesome. And this series is a case in point for that. It's in almost every instance, Brandon took the opportunity to go for the more awesome thing. And Babelar, I think, is the best example of that, of the settings, where it gives him the most opportunity to do awesome things in the setting, where you can have this really cool nighttime party on a rooftop that transitions into like a chase scene through the buildings. You can have like the graffiti and the flowers and the fortune cookies and the jetpack, the water jetpack, and the underwater secret base and things like that. It's such a rich environment with so many different opportunities within it, where Ildithia and New Cago are more
rigid,
uniform. It's more just like one thing. There's one defining characteristic of each of those, where there's much more diversity in Babelar.
Yeah, it could be just like the gamer in me, but I did find that I appreciated the flexible environment, I suppose, if you want to call it. because like you just mentioned, I almost said Ildithia. Babelar just seemed to kind of mix everything. It had water, but it still had skyscrapers, and you were up in the skyscrapers, but it had the underwater.
Yeah.
There was a lot. You're right. There was a lot of range, a lot of flexibility with that environment, a lot of things that Brandon could do to play with it. Gave him really a big chance to flex those air on the side of awesome muscles for a Zeroth Law. Ildithia, I don't know. City of Salt. It sounds like it would be spectacular on film. Sorry, my throat is still screwed up. Wow. And as Lauren mentioned earlier, like the artistry in the growing rock salt, that sounds kind of cool. The colors, I didn't realize rock salt really just has the potential for all this myriad of just different colors and strata, and it sounds like it would look great on film, but I just don't think it would have the impact of the glowing fruit and the surging waves and or maybe the permanent night and the lighting of New Chicago and stuff like that, and how it dims over the day, steel and everything, and sparks being struck on a t-shirt that you accidentally run over, like, I don't know. Ildithia seemed... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. As you guys were talking about it, I realized how long it's been since I read Firefight.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, yeah, I did love the neon. I do remember now.
And the people kind of really won it over for me, too, because they're all just, like, kind of head in the clouds, like, just relax. Everybody has fun. No need to worry yourselves about it. That's totally a mindset I can get myself into, post-apocalypse. I think that would be me in there, eating fruit, glowing fruit. That people will find a way to ferment anything. I think that was a line in the second book.
Yeah.
I don't know why we're spending so much time talking about Firefight, though. Damn it, we're on Calamity here.
This is the third book in the series, so everything has to be taken in context with what came before it. And,
true
and
that.
Especially, how the series builds up and where it ends in Calamity, and so one thing I did really enjoy in Ildithia, it's probably my favorite action scene in the whole series.
Oh.
Is the party in the tower.
Yeah.
The
tower that
was a
whole
huge
sequence
climax.
was amazing.
And it was long,
so good.
longer than I remembered it being. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so much character packed in there. There's so much action. The fraught situations. It's tense. You get these startling revelations. You have like Megan's powers coming into play, and like Prof's alternate daughter, and then Tia's death, and all of this coming together, and this is part of the reason why I think the real climax of this book fell flat for me, because that scene felt like it should have been the climax.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. Yep.
And then we have another 100 pages, maybe 70, 80 pages after that feels like a falling action instead of it continuing to ramp up. It's one of those situations where the Sanderson avalanche didn't keep the momentum going. And it sort of peaked early, and then there was what amounted to an extended denouement that had an unsatisfying conclusion to it. Yeah. So it's almost like I can't even say that Brennan should have written 4 books, and that this, like, Ildithia should have been its own thing, and then he should have expanded something into Calamity, like maybe have this called Limelight, and then the 4th book be called Calamity or something. But I mean, that would bring its own set of problems. But it's interesting because I'm comparing this to Skyward, where it's his new YA series, and again it was a trilogy, and then he realized, wait a second, this will work better as 4 books. And it makes me wonder if he ran into a similar kind of situation in his plotting of the Skyward trilogy as he had in Calamity, and he learned from his mistake in Calamity, and he decided, no, this is going to work better if I split this into 2, and I have this great conclusion to the 3rd book, instead of having that be a mid-book mini-climax,
Yeah, I agree. The tower scene felt so much more heavy. The tower scene was... It felt like the true climax of the book. It was... If it would have ended there, it would have been a little short, but I still think I would have been more satisfied with a fourth book. I can absolutely see that. I hadn't even considered a fourth book, but I can, putting it in context, I can actually see. I wouldn't have a problem buying another Brandon Sanderson book. I doubt either of you would have a problem buying a fourth Brandon Sanderson book for this series. It would have been awesome, Yeah, the ending definitely to me fell a little flat. I'll get way more into detail for in the conclusion of this episode. I have a whole point written up about that. But for now, I think you guys want to start moving on to our characters because, yeah, sure, might as well, right? Starting with David, of course, our main character. How can you start with anybody else? I'll say they were okay. So there were a couple of I didn't like David in this volume. I liked him a lot in Steelheart. I really found him pretty cool in Firefight. Didn't like him so much in Calamity. What about you two? What did you think of David?
I did like him in this one.
Yeah?
I thought it was a cool twist having him actually end up with epic powers, and I liked
You
how
found that to
Brandon
be a twist?
foreshadowed. Well, yeah, in a way, because it's set up at the end of Firefight to where he rejected it. And then over the course of Calamity, you get these hints that, like, well, maybe it happened anyway.
Hints. And it was like a neon sign saying, look at this, everybody.
Progressively more obvious. And so that's why I enjoyed it. I liked the way Brandon, like, worked that in gradually instead of just, like, starting the book off with, oh, by the way, I have powers now. Like, it... And I like his relationship with Megan a hell of a lot. I was a little frustrated at points. I wanted Megan to not have to deal with the darkness for this book. I wanted that overcoming of her fear in Firefight to be a permanent thing.
Yeah, somehow I thought that was it. I don't know.
That was a little frustrating reading through it, but because she still had to struggle with the darkness, she and David retain that really fun dynamic that we talked about so much in Firefight. I think the two characters play off each other really, really well. What about you, Lauren?
You agree?
I agree. Although I like Megan a lot more. It frustrated me that his dealing with the powers, he kept rejecting it, and I was kind of like, could you please, like, I know that Brandon wanted to keep him a sidekick for the series, because that was the point, was like, he's not the hero, but he is. He doesn't have the powers, but he is the hero,
Right, yeah.
And it was frustrating. I wanted him to accept the powers earlier, because he'd already faced his fears. I was like, well, can you please, like, can you save Tia, maybe, if you accept the powers at an earlier time?
There are a few moments where a bit of hesitation or a bit of self-doubt really, and I can, of course, having read the series before, going back and having more context for what's happening, I definitely have moments where I'm like, okay, people are dying right now. You're going to accept that you're going to save them a minute from now, but for the next minute, people are dying, and you're sitting here going, oh, I don't know if I should, maybe I can, maybe I can't, on the subject of David getting his powers, I mean, that scene that we got at the end of Firefight, when David actually is risen up by Calamity, well, to see Calamity by Regalia's waters, that might be my favorite scene in the entire series. And it was over so quickly, because we found out that Calamity was an epic right before that, right? It was unbelievable. It was such a huge, heavy, I don't know why it took me by surprise as much as it did, but it definitely did. And it was over with so quickly, David, it was just kind of tossed aside. David's like, I'm good, thanks though, And I was just, what? That's it? I mean, I didn't expect him to take it, but there should be more info. Is it not like a conversation with Calamity? The whole thing was immediately tossed aside because this climax needed to start. The Sanderson avalanche at the end of the book needed to the ball to get rolling. So the entirety of Calamity, I'm just waiting. I found myself waiting for the result of that, the other shoe to drop. And once David started getting his nightmares, I want to say it was like chapter 15 or chapter 11 started with one of his nightmares. I was like, at that point, I was like, okay, so he's definitely an epic. He's just refusing to accept it at this point, or he just is not grasping that power. On the subject of Megan, I don't know why I don't seem to remember this. I thought like you had just mentioned, when she faced her fears to save David's life in Firefight, I thought, okay, the darkness is detached from her now. For some reason, even though I've read this book 3 times already, I just wasn't prepared for Megan to have such a struggle in this one with Calamity's corruption. I just didn't seem to remember it happening, although I could see why Brendan would still include it. As you said, it's great for the chemistry between David and Megan. It gives him a lot of things to play with in their interactions. So I could see why he did it. I just don't remember it being an issue until I guarantee you I'm gonna forget again until I go and read it a fifth time. Months or years down the road, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's right.
I do love that scene where she's trying to give her powers away, and then she's like, no, this is my burden. I love that.
Yeah.
Where she can't give them away anymore. She's fully accepted
they're
it.
part of her. They come to that realization that her powers are part of her. David loves her, so he kind of loves her powers too. And it's a little, he doesn't want to see her make that kind of sacrifice just for him.
Well, and she doesn't. She's like, no. This is.
And she takes
me.
that on. This is part of me. Like, this is not something I can. This is not. I could just like an amputation I can perform. Or you can perform. So and of course we really needed that moment from her because it gave us a lot of, hints for the future and figuring out, I think, Prof's weakness and figuring out the entirety of the puzzle. And that's something I didn't remember. I know I've said this like 10 times already. I thought that the entirety of the secret was just facing one's fears. Somehow through, my first read through the trilogy, my second read through, my third read through, all these dozens of times reading Steelheart, I thought that was the entire answer. For some reason, I didn't find out. I just now learned at the end of this book that it's actually it has one further stipulation. You have to face your fears to save someone else. Simply facing your fears is not enough. Don't know why it took me until my fourth read through to pick that one up, but I kind of found it as a neat little stipulation there. I like that, how they added that balance.
And so, speaking about Megan's powers, how do you feel about the direction that took in this book, where it wasn't just illusions, it's that she's literally, tapping into alternate dimensions? Because that opens, a whole can of worms.
Yeah, I found it very convoluted and confusing. I found it, convenient at times. Maybe it's just because I find myself struggling to kind of grasp everything that she can do and that she can't do. Of course, we get a little more information from Larson / Calamity about how there are such things as core possibilities and ephemeral possibilities, or whatever the terminology was that he used. But I don't know. Megan's powers, I kind of liked it better when I thought she was just an illusionist.
Yeah, but that at least it gives us an explanation for how she can die and come back.
I guess.
She can die and leave a body and then come back, because it's just like pulling another one of the infinite versions of her.
Do we know that for a fact though, or we just assume that?
That's the impression I got from it.
I definitely remember them talking about it as a possibility, and that's why Megan was really filled with a lot of self-doubt, and then that's why David was able to give her that perfect metaphor about the sunrise. But I don't know. I didn't think that was like a definitive answer. I thought that was just like a philosophical, maybe this is it, maybe this is not it. Does it really matter? Was what I really left that with.
Yeah, I was with you.
Sweet. I don't know. I have a couple more things about David I want to complain about, though. You mind if I get those out of the way? All right. So, now, there were a couple of decisions, let's say questionable choices that David makes in this volume as the new leader of the Reckoners. And there are a couple of things I don't really agree with, or maybe I just felt maybe weren't in his character. And I'll just provide a couple of examples. So, in Chapter 18, his plan to forego using the Imager technology and instead form his plan on a public walk with his team through the streets of Ildithia. I mean, first off, pretty unwise. I mean, there's the danger of being overheard by the citizenry, yada yada. But on this read-through, I realized something else. Dynamo, the Epic. Wasn't Dynamo an Epic who's supposed to have sound manipulation powers?
Oh.
I mean, he made the open public discussion of this whole plan seem a little bit extra foolish to me. And as we've seen in the previous two books, David, he's immature, he's naive, but he's still a lot like Prof in some ways. We know that for a fact. And for me, in particular, he's a lot like Prof in the way that they're both very pragmatic dudes. They're very realistic. Granted, it did provide the perfect opportunity for this timely, heartfelt speech that he gave his crew, but it went so against what I thought David would do that it felt a little transparent to me. I kind of got the vague feeling that the entire scene was kind of set up around that particular speech, and it was a good speech. It was a great speech. But since I was doing such a deep look at the book overall this time, it kind of took me a little bit out of the narrative at that point.
That's fair. It was like it's sort of reverse engineered, like on Brandon's part. Like he wrote that scene to set up the speech.
Yeah, like I don't know that for a fact, but it just to me,
natural.
It kind of read like that. Yeah, I don't know.
That's fair.
What do you think? Did you find him making any decisions that you were like, what, or not?
I mean,
I wasn't really thinking about it that way.
See, like to me, that's not necessarily out of character because David, in all three of the books, David makes some choices that are not always the wisest.
Sure.
Because he is still like a young man. He's still learning and still growing, and one of his main character struggles in this is like dealing and learning with this newfound responsibility that he has as a public figure, as a notorious, person, and especially in this where he's like, he no longer has Prof to fall back on as a leader. So,
yeah. I mean, I'll throw my second example at you. Let's see how you feel about this one then. When they find Tia for the first time, and she starts asking questions. What, David, the first time I met you, we talked about this. What was the subject of discussion? Guns everywhere trained on them, and David's he doesn't realize what she's doing, that she's trying to confirm their identity. He's just like, oh, why does that matter? Tia, that doesn't matter. We gotta talk about this. And Abraham has to be like the one, dumbass. She's just trying to make sure you are who you are, because there's epics everywhere. Was he really that unaware of what Tia was doing? I mean, it just seemed like it was obvious. I don't know how David didn't manage to grasp it, putting himself and his squad in danger, because he's just like, oh, I don't want to answer those questions. We have more pressing things to talk about, even though I have guns pointed at me.
I think I see that as his stress about leading the team. And he's just like, oh my gosh, Tia, blah, 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 blah. Let me unload on you. Like, why are we talking about anything else? This is what my concern is right now. And he's not even thinking.
There was a very big moment, and to balance those complaints that I just had, I will say there was a very big moment for David where I felt like he really grew up, and that was a moment in the tower when, after they've just rescued Tia, all of Regalia's secrets are within reach on Prof's computer, and instead of improvising as he normally would choose to do, he orders his team to retreat. And I felt that was a really big decision for David to make. We have never seen him say, okay, fall back before it. Every single time before this point, when something goes wrong, David's like, I can fix this. This. But when he's in Prof's role, when he is no longer point, when he's the team leader, he has to make much bigger decisions than simply thinking about his own safety. So I thought that big moment of change for David, where he decides to order the retreat, I actually liked it. I thought it was a big step for him.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It's because that's his kind of biggest conflict in this is learning how to be a leader and learning how to take care of those around him instead of just worrying about himself. And that was, I agree with you. I think that was a formative point for him.
Yeah, and I also want to point out, I found it really appropriate how disappointed he was when Tia was captured, and he realized just how badly he wanted her to take over. He wants to pass off the responsibility so badly. Again, just like Prof. He's so much like this guy,
Yeah.
And I suppose my final point about David, at least, just a side note here. There was a scene with David and Abraham on bicycles, and David's memories of his father. He's got David crying, and it kind of choked me up. I didn't get so choked up the first 3 times I read it, and this time I was really getting choked up. I was listening to it at work, although I'm pretty sure that at least half of that was just because the stupid shop radio was blasting that Dixie Chicks song, Landslide, with the little acoustic in the background. You know the song. I guarantee you know the song. Lauren, show him the song after this.
Is it
He'll
a
be
cover?
like, oh yeah. What's that?
Is it a cover of the original Landslide?
I don't know. It's a Dixie Chicks version. I thought they did the original. They could be. I didn't know they did a cover. It might. I don't know. But it was definitely the Dixie Chicks version.
Okay.
Landslide, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a cover.
overestimating-
That's a cover.
Oh yeah.
And a crappy one. Yes.
That one was playing. It was so like soft, and while I was listening to that scene with David on the bicycle crying, and I was just sitting there at my welding machine going, oh, okay, I'm manly over here, get back in there, Tyr.
I choked up at the end too. Like with his.
Oh, with his father.
Yeah.
I remember being so confused and irritated the first 3 times. Why was I so emotional the 4th time? I don't know. Maybe it took that extra deep look. Could be it. I don't know. So yeah. So we've anything else you guys want to discuss specifically about David's journey before we just move on to some other characters? We have touched on Megan a little bit, but those two kind of go hand in hand, literally and figuratively, I suppose.
All I'll say is I think it's obvious, but it was also appropriate to have David get Steelheart's powers.
You really thought that was obvious? I mean, I thought him becoming an epic was obvious. But like actually having Steelheart's portfolio, saw that going exactly there.
The narrative choice on Brandon's part was obvious. It was the appropriate thing to do as a
How
writer.
so? I don't get it. How was that more appropriate than just creating a whole new portfolio?
Circle. It brings it full circle. He's Steel Slayer. He's the one who took down Steelheart. He's the one who had this upbringing from his father, who was convinced that epics can be good, and Steelheart became the symbol of epics are bad. And then by giving Steelheart's powers to David and having him become the real symbol of epics can be good, it was this full circle narrative.
Yeah, see, I felt like he could have accomplished that with David's father, though. That itself, just David's father having that exact same portfolio would have been the answer we needed.
Well, it's all parts of the same whole,
I suppose,
because that's in that alternate dimension. So, but I liked it. I mean, I thought it was a good choice. It was not the most subtle thing he's ever done, but I thought it was a good choice.
I wanted David to have like the most powerful, abilities. I thought, David deserves it. But actually, I never really considered him having Steelheart's specific portfolio. I guess, for his reality, it was kind of a full circle thing.
He can fly. He can shoot blasts of power.
Yeah.
He's invulnerable.
He's gonna be super buff.
He does
apparently.
have the most like.
But no,
powerful.
I don't know. Oh, I would argue that regalia or obliteration. I think obliteration could have killed Steelheart. I think obliteration arguably has maybe not the most impressive power, but I don't know, the greatest potential for power.
His voice for him in the audiobook is so creepy.
Which
too.
one? Sorry. Oh, obliteration.
For obliteration.
My god, I loved it so much. Shout out to McLeod Andrews. I have a couple compliments to pay him later in the episode, but his obliteration. That's actually what I have written here under my obliteration point. Well, it's one of the things I have written down, of course, because obliteration is a dude that I didn't get a chance to talk about last episode, and I'm gonna want to say so much about him in this episode. But yes, McLeod Andrews' delivery, the kind of very soft voice, the kind of biblical quotes. It's like, whoa! I just it chills every time he speaks. It was great.
Well, let's talk about obliteration then.
All right, sweet. You don't gotta twist my arm. Someone I didn't get a chance to talk about last episode. He's perfectly creepy and badass, but in just the right ratio and just the right mix. The way he's constantly quoting scripture, he just comes across so detached from everyone else's problems. He added a real serious flavor of post-humanism to the equation to me. Maybe not on the same scale, but in the same way, I would say, as Dr. Manhattan. He completely stole every scene he was in. He's just so unconcerned with everyone else's trivialities. He just has his focus on everything at once. I don't know. His entrance in this book was excellent. The way he just, in the tower party, he just rotates into view, and then he looks into David's eyes, and he just smiles, and the chapter ends right there.
What a creep.
What a creep. And then he just shows up. How the hell does he recognize David? How? I have a theory. Obliteration is more than obliteration. Obliteration is something else. I think obliteration knows shit, pardon my French, that even Calamity himself doesn't know. He's just, no other epic was able to recognize them. But then Obliteration again and again and again shows that ability to do that. And he says, "Oh, it's because of your eyes." And it's like, no, it's not. You're a freak. You have some sort of ability that we don't know about yet. But I don't know.
No, I think he's just nuts. And there are some nutty people who have these kind of like, I know you. I know your soul.
I don't know. I've never met anybody quite like Obliteration in my life, and if I did, I'd be running in the other fucking direction, powers or not. You know?
I've met people like him. One guy in Old Town, he's got some mental illness and he's homeless. But he looked at me and he was like, "You have a good soul." And I was like, "'Cause I smile?"
You mean like nutritious? You mean like beautiful? Like what are you gonna do? Like what are you talking about? I don't know.
But no, I agree with Lauren on this. I think Obliteration just like has like a creepy insightfulness. I don't necessarily think he's got some unexplored powers. He's like, I mean, he is set up to be, you know, a further antagonist.
Oh, I would love to see more Obliteration.
But I don't think Brandon is setting it up like, oh, he's like another level even than Calamity. I think he's an attempt to make a purely human antagonist in this, especially with the conversation he has at the very end of the book with David when he reveals that, oh, I overcame my fears 5 years ago.
Yep, that's another point I had to talk
like,
about there. It was
I'm
really
not doing
great.
this because of Calamity's corruption and the darkness. I'm doing this because I'm crazy. I'm a crazy person, and I think I'm like the flaming sword of Saint Michael the Archangel, and I'm here to bring on like the end times and all of this stuff. Like, I think it's something Brandon's setting up to make a more, for lack
pressing
of a better
threat.
term, down to earth threat.
Okay, yeah.
Pun not intended.
I was a little creeped out to hear that his next target.
Is Toronto.
My next target is Toronto. You may meet me there, Steel Slayer. I was like, oh no, get it away from me. That's close to me. No. No.
You do that accent really well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I listened to that. You should hear these guys looking at me at work because I'm sitting there trying to do all of McLeod Andrews, like his Abraham, too. I love his Abraham. And these guys are looking at me. This guy's just talking to himself, especially when I'm quoting Obliteration. You wish to set down your cup. And it's like, what? This is my coworker's looking at me like, what are you talking? I'm just, never mind, I'm listening to something. Don't worry. Just let me do my thing.
So I want to move on to our other main epic antagonist in this. I want to talk about Prof.
Prof! My man. What a dickhead.
I think he's phenomenal antagonist.
Yes.
He's we get him built up as a good guy over the first 2 books, and so we understand how capable and how formidable he is. And then when the tables are turned and suddenly he's the opponent, it is very threatening. It's scary to see him in, full powers and, fully under the sway of the corruption and, some of those scenes, man.
To me, I love, it was great material, a great antagonist to suddenly just flip everything over with at the end of Firefight and say, guess what, he's gone rogue now, and he's the most powerful and frightening of all. I did appreciate that. I liked Prof so much in the first couple books. I kept expecting him to suddenly change his mind about what he's doing, I kept expecting this moment of humanity as he's about to kill the Reckoners, and he just realizes what he's doing. I don't know. He just.
Well, that's what makes him such a fantastic villain in this, because Brandon avoids the easy way out with it, and when he doesn't, have that moment of realization and overcome his inner darkness by himself, it gets even scarier.
Yes.
Because you're like, oh my gosh, like how are they gonna do this?
And I have a point about that. So I think obviously Prof and Obliteration are better antagonists than Calamity, and I think that's one reason why this fell flat. Calamity is a spoiled child, as we are led to see it. Mm-hmm. And Prof is Prof and Obliteration are real evils, and they're human. And they're You can feel it.
What does it say that the people, at least they started human, are the ones that are really, really the better antagonists? And Calamity, this high epic 1,000 times over, is just like, it's just not a. I don't know. I didn't like Calamity at all. But Prof, I know I was just complimenting McLeod Andrews. I don't like his Prof. I don't like it. It's too growly. It's too dark. He talks like this, like a heavy smoker. It's like, I don't know. But at the end, it was pretty intimidating when Prof is screaming. I haven't heard him do a Prof scream before, but it was pretty powerful. But overall, his Prof is just a little too dark and gravelly and broody for me. I don't know. I didn't like that one.
I guess it affects how I see him. I see him that way because in the audiobook, he talks that way.
Yeah, he's very gruff. Very, very gruff. I don't know. But how'd you feel like where he ended? You like that okay, actually, what I really want to know is what you think about his weakness. Do you think that Brandon sowed those narrative seeds, that he sprinkled those hints in there appropriately? Do you feel like there should have been more hints? Do you feel like maybe he was a little too heavy-handed with it? How did you feel about the revelation of Prof's actual weakness?
Like the fear of failure?
The fear of failure, yeah, and how it was an abstract concept. We thought that it was his own powers, right? We thought that.
I thought it was mostly very well done. Because he started laying the seeds for it as far back as Steelheart.
Yeah.
And even more so in Firefight.
Yeah, there were a few moments in Firefight that I brought up. I think one that I mentioned just out of context and said, I'm not going to explain more. Yeah.
There was a good slow burn on that one. Where it made sense. So
I felt like that hit home more than the other weaknesses. For me, obviously, I'm not afraid of fire, I'm not afraid of water, but that fear of weakness was just like, we all have a little bit of that. And just taking him from the ideal man just really hit home for me. His weakness did.
What would be your weakness then? Yeah, if there's one thing that you're terrified, if you were an epic, Drew and Lauren, if both of you got epic powers, what would be your respective weaknesses? Is there anything you fear that much, just that you can say right off the bat?
Holy crap.
I know. I was considering asking this actually last episode and setting some homework and being like, hey, let's come up with an answer for the final podcast. I totally forgot to mention that. It's my bad.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know.
I can tell you, I gave it some thought.
The obvious one for me would be fear of heights.
Really? I had no idea. You have vertigo?
So,
that's dizziness, though.
So I do have vertigo, but that's something different.
Yeah.
I have Meniere's disease, is what it's called. It's like an inner ear thing where I get hearing loss and
seriously?
dizziness. Yeah.
My mom has that.
Oh no way.
I'm not you right now.
Yeah, but no. So when I was much younger, I was in I think it was 7th or 8th grade. I was skiing and through a bizarre, set of circumstances, a little 6 or 7 year old kid crashed into me from behind, and I went over the side of a cliff and landed in a snowbank 20 feet down, staring down a sheer cliff face at the tops of pine trees dozens of feet below me, and I was stuck there with my legs trapped underneath me for 45 minutes or an hour until. So I don't ski anymore, and I'm afraid of heights now.
That's what you get for living in Colorado. B, that sounds like a perfect one of those epic stories that you hear about later.
Yes.
Like Edmund with the dogs. That I was sitting here. I was like, I want to kind of write this down. I don't know why, but damn, that sounds terrifying, dude. So heights, eh? So if you were an epic, you better hope. Well, I mean, you probably wouldn't have flight powers. So if we wanted to do the hit on Andrew McCaffrey, whatever your epic name would be, we just got to push you off a skyscraper, right? Sweet.
Yeah, that would do it.
You know what it'd be for me? And this might be a weird kind of fear. It would be a lack of sleep. I need my sleep.
Really?
I have trouble sleeping. I have trouble getting out of bed. I'm slowly losing my mind because I can't get a full night's sleep, and it's really dragging me down over these past few years. I don't know. I've got back problems. But if someone wanted to take me down as an epic, I don't know why I'd be saying this. I don't want to spread this information out there. But all you got to do is keep me awake for I can't stay awake for it. I can't pull an all-nighter. By the time I reach 30 hours, I'm manic. I'm shaking. I'm I need sleep. I'm inside my own head. If you can keep me awake for 2 straight days, boom, my epic powers are gone. Shot to the brain is all it takes.
I will say the research that we have on sleep It's so crucial for
Oh.
your health. You cannot make it up.
I can't tell you the last time I had a dream. It's probably been like 4 years, probably,
Whoa.
Jeez.
since I was in college. Like I don't think
crazy.
I've actually achieved a deep sleep since then. I can't sleep for more than 3 hours at a time. I could sleep for
Oh,
like
man.
12. I could be in bed for 12, but it's like 3 hours. I always wake up after 3 hours, and then I need
Well,
to spend another hour awake, and then it's up.
It's okay to do it like biphasically, you know, where you sleep for 3 hours,
Yeah.
up, and then 3 hours, and then, you know, that's all right, as long as you get your most of your sleep.
I don't. If I go down to sleep for 12 hours, I'm not sleeping for 12. I'm sleeping in 3 hour increments. I need to get up
Yeah,
again
that's
and again.
that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah,
Like
sweet.
a lot of
I'm still
hunter-gatherer
alive.
tribes. Yeah. Hunter-gatherer tribes do it biphasically, where they sleep
Yeah.
overnight for like 4 to 6, and then they take a nap in the afternoon.
But sometimes I hear my friends going, it's like, oh, I didn't sleep at all last night. I'm going on, a day and a half now. I pulled an all-nighter. I'm just looking at them like, dude, I would be a puddle of goo if I was you right now. How are you still walking? I don't know.
Okay, so
Yeah, let's get
Lauren,
back on
what
track.
would your weakness be?
Mine's a little more graphic. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. We can censor it if need be, I'm sure.
Oh man. Okay.
You don't
so
have to say it. It's fine. Or you could just come up with a false answer, too. Bugs. How do you feel about bugs? Centipedes.
They're fine. No, I like
Millipedes
bugs.
give me the heebie-jeebies. Ugh.
I mean, they could bite you, and some of them are poisonous. Well, venomous.
Mm.
Yes.
Really?
I
I
Some
didn't
of them
know
are
that.
poisonous.
I didn't need to know that.
Some
Why'd you
of
tell me that?
Probably not the ones near you, but
Yeah, I'm in Canada. I'm good up here.
Yeah, everything dies up there.
All
the insects
it
can't
might even
survive.
be ants. It might even be ants. I was digging in the ground one time when I was 14 years old with my hands. I don't know why I'm digging. Apparently I'm a monkey. I'm digging in the ground with my hands, and suddenly I felt like this burning itch on my arms.
Oh no.
And I looked down, and it was about 150 ants had just crawled up my forearms. I hadn't noticed, and they all started biting in the same instant.
Oh.
In the same instant, I had to run
That's
to.
rough.
Thank God we had a pool for me to go and jump into, because I
Yeah.
was like, ugh. And even to this day, 200-pound iron worker, 27 years old. If I see a pile of ants, like anything more than like 10 ants, I'm stepping away from it. I'm getting away from it. They gave me the heebie-jeebies.
Oh.
okay. I have a lesser one I just thought of.
Oh, okay.
So, I grew up going to lakes a lot, and I hate the idea of something like a fish or whatever it is brushing my foot without me being able to see it.
I stepped on a fish carcass once and it cut my foot. I'll never be able to step in open
Ooh.
water again.
So I wear like water shoes.
Yeah.
It makes me feel better. Like something could still brush my foot, but that fixes it.
I guess water shoes is a good idea.
yeah, water shoes.
I need to get hooked up on some water shoes. That's what I need. 'Cause I can't go water. I'm surrounded by all the Great Lakes. We have beaches everywhere here. Everywhere.
Well, you
know?
have some
I can
scary
walk
stuff.
20 minutes that way, and there's I'll be on a lake. Well, 15 minutes actually. I'll be on a lake, like in all directions. There's water everywhere. I haven't gone swimming in the lake in like 15 years because the last time I did, I stepped on a fish carcass and it cut my foot.
There are some scary fish in those lakes.
Not these
I
ones.
don't. Yeah. I
Oh,
don't blame you at all.
Yeah.
Oh.
Anyway.
Well, anyway, back to
Yeah,
back to
back to
Calamity.
Calamity.
We're getting pretty close to our our time here.
Are we seriously?
So yeah. Should we maybe get some like closing thoughts or
Oh
like
my God,
pressing?
Yeah, for sure. Let's see here. Okay, so I just Abraham, really quick. We found out his last name, Abraham Desjardins.
Yeah.
Very classic French-Canadian name. That one.
Very.
In fact, one of the guys that works at our shop from time to time, who leaves and comes back here and there, is his name. His last name is Desjardins. Of Gardens, I think that one means. Well, my French is a little rusty.
That sounds right.
And
Yeah.
I did appreciate that he's my favorite reckoner. I think I mentioned this a couple times already. I think I have a man crush on Abraham. I think I just have
Yeah.
to accept that. I do like that he was the last of the reckoners whose backstory we finally learned.
Yeah.
We found out that he was Jetiefzu Kansafcom, Canadian Special Forces. And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And it was really surreal to see such a strong character start to crack. There's one point when he says to David, he's like, David, in all kindness and peace, your plans have already made me exhaust myself today. And now you want me to walk across the city again. He goes, "C'est pas d'allure. One wonders if you have determined I am getting fat." I love that line. And one final Abraham line that I want to bring to the forefront. David, when he sees Megan and Mizzy working together on notes, he says to Abraham, he's all surprised. He's like, "They're talking!" And to which Abe replies, he's like, "You expected maybe clucking?" You know? I like that one.
Yeah.
So
He's a
Abraham.
good character.
Yeah, he was awesome. Final thoughts, y'all?
So I want to just kind of bring up Apocalypse Guard real quick.
Sure.
Which is the sort of ancillary continuation of the Reckoners universe that Brandon has planned, and that he is now co-writing, because when he wrote the first draft, it just was not working. You know, he had to call his publisher and tell him, "Hey, I'm pulling the book," and that's how we ended up with Skyward. But it seems like the Apocalypse Guard is progressing decently well. He's working with Dan Wells, I think. He's another one of Brandon's writer friends. He's on the Writing Excuses podcast with Brandon, and it sounds like that's moving along well. He's worked out a lot of the issues, and it's kind of nice for us as Sanderson fans. It gives Brandon more bandwidth to work on stuff like the Cosmere, and still get his side stories out there. I think it's going to be cool to read the Apocalypse Guard. I'm looking forward to getting more answers about Calamity and Calamity's people and how all of that works. But it does bug me a little bit that we need that to really get closure on the Reckoners.
I agree 100%. I don't know. Okay, so as far as the ending of this book, and I had mentioned earlier in the podcast that I was going to explain myself, and I said I wasn't really satisfied the first couple of times. This is basically why. Let's see here. I'm just searching through my notes. Okay, so the more I look at it, the more I realize that a lot of my confusion actually comes from Megan's powers. There just seems to be so many stipulations, so many exceptions, so many unexpected things, and then unexpected limitations. And the fact that our entire ending with David's reality and his father's reality sort of, not merging, but joining in force. They formed one full happy family finally, with David beginning to learn his epic powers. It left me a little detached. Reading David's reunion with his father was more heartwarming than I remember it being, but I found the specific reason now why I was left with this kind of confusion, or why I guess it stems from expectation. Being the end of the trilogy, the Reckoner story, Drew, as you were just saying, I suppose I was hoping to have all of my questions answered, and there is something to be said about leaving things vague, or leaving some loose ends. I think Brandon handled that very nicely with the Wheel of Time. But I don't know, what I wasn't expecting was to end this series with even more questions than I had going in as a final volume in this trilogy, and maybe it's because I tie answers and endings together too closely in my head. But looking at it with a subjective eye, I think it's a lot of where my original disappointment stemmed from.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. And the book was phenomenal. It's not my favorite of his works, and I still maintain that I enjoyed both Steelheart and Firefight a lot more.
Yeah.
But I did come out of this read with a lot more appreciation than I had before. I paid for my hardcover on release day. I spent an Audible credit on audiobook for work, and just this morning I bought it again for my Kobo so I could do precise quotes and snippets. 3 times over I bought this book. Still worth it.
Nice. Lauren, do you have any last thoughts here?
I mean, I still maintain that the problem is a lot of with Calamity. I don't have problems with Megan's powers. I think it's just because I've thought about it so much. What would be possible if you could reach into alternate dimensions? And maybe some of the limitations are self-imposed, or, I don't know, physics related. But with Calamity, he just comes across as not your normal villain. He seems so, I don't know, vulnerable, which is not how you want an antagonist.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
You want him to be the big bad, you know, and Prof and Obliteration are more big bad than Calamity is, the spoiled child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one thing I wanted to get your opinion on, Drew. Something I found in the audiobook, specifically in the audiobook. And I had mentioned before that I don't think I would ever be playing part of an audiobook on this podcast because that would make monetization difficult. But this isn't technically part of the book. This is a footnote at the end of the book.
Is it? I know exactly what you're talking about.
Do you know what?
Is
okay,
it about mitosis?
Yes. I'm going to play it right now just so you guys...
Yep,
Lauren,
yep.
do you know what I'm about to do?
Yes, I do.
Okay, check this out, everybody. Hold on. 3 seconds.
This book is over, but the story continues. Keep listening after the credits to hear the beginning of Mitosis, a Reckoner story. Book 4 in the Reckoner series, free.
Okay. What was that?
A mistake.
Yeah, I happened to hear Lauren finishing listening to her audiobook, and I immediately perked up. I was like, well, that was an editorial mistake there.
You know, that is not the only time that's actually happened for a book on this podcast. I just didn't mention it last time. That happened in Kane's Law. Stefan Rudnicki, well, it was not his fault. He had it written down for him. It said, oh, God, which one was it? It said, it mentioned that Kane's Law was the third book, where it said Kane Black Knife was book 4. It mixed up one of those two.
Whoops.
Yeah, I know. I was like, what are you saying? You know, but then I was like, maybe it's something I'm not.
Make a case for the
Acts of Atonement?
The Act of Atonement,
Yeah.
where like it's so non-linear. It'd be like, oh well,
And
maybe
I remember,
it took place after.
Damn it, I should have written down exactly what it was. But I remember thinking like that could be it, but it still doesn't make sense because of the way they had phrased it.
Yeah,
I don't know, but it's definitely worth looking into. If you have the audiobooks for the Acts of Cain, go listen to the beginning and of book 3 and the beginning of book 4. No, the end of book 3 and the end of book 4. You'll hear it too. You'll be,
Yeah.
What the heck? So, yeah.
All right. Well, let's move into the final draft then.
Sweet. I can start since I'm doing exactly what I did last week, and I'm just drinking water because
Yay, healthy.
carbs, right?
All right, Lauren, you take it away.
Okay, so I had a Gestalt moment where I was like, I know what beer I want to bring. Green Flash for Prof.
Oh, Green Flash. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want to take a look at this thing. Do you have it like in a glass or something?
So
Sweet.
the brewery's called Green Flash.
Oh, the brewery's called Green Flash. Okay.
And
I can see a little
they're
symbol on there. It
California
looks like an
based.
aloe.
Yeah. So apparently, since I've never lived by the beach, this is a thing that happens when you see a sunset over the ocean.
Oh, they
You
had
can
a
see,
point
like-
about that in Pirates of the Caribbean, I think.
Sorry,
it was
not
a major plot
sunset,
point.
sunrise. Sunrise over the beach.
I thought it was
you can
both.
see I don't know. I haven't
The
seen
Green
it
Flash,
ever.
yeah.
But it's supposed to happen. It's a
Yeah?
phenomenon.
I
you
thought
know?
that was a total myth. I know all about the lore of it, but I thought that was just a total fictional thing. Is that like a real... I guess it could be inspired
Apparently
by a real
it's
world
real.
event. Yeah.
I just haven't seen it.
Okay.
we
I'm gonna look
we
into
live
that
in a
after this.
landlocked state, you know?
Sweet.
But
look into it.
anyways, I was gonna do their just Green Flash IPA, but they're out of that, so I did Cosmic Ristretto.
Ah. Nice.
I felt like it referred to the end, you know,
Yeah. I like
cosmic,
it. Yeah.
and it's a roasty,
Interconnectivity.
smooth, Baltic porter with espresso.
Sweet. With espresso? You got some caffeine in that?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Oh yeah,
Mixing the best of both worlds.
I feel good.
I wish I felt that good right now. Stupid fucking keto diet. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead. Drew, my man, what are you drinking, dude?
Yeah. So today I have something pretty special in.
Pretty special.
So this is a collaboration between New Belgium Brewing Company in Port Collis, Colorado. and
Not
the
your
Rare
first
Barrel
time
out in
bringing New
California.
Belgium on. Yeah.
And so this is the Rare Barrel has a lambic. It's like a cherry sour. And they blended their Rare Barrel lambic with New Belgium's dark sour base called Oscar, and then aged it in wine barrels, in 17 different wine barrels, and then blended them all together, along with New Belgium's golden sour, which is called Felix. So this is a crazy blended, essentially a Creek lambic. So it's like a cherry sour, wood aged, and it's super, super good.
Oh, yes.
But even better, it is called Air on the Side of Awesome.
No, it's not. No, it's
Read
not.
it.
Bullshit. Bullshit. What happened before this episode is you guys printed that out and you glued it on there and you're playing a fucking prank on me. There's no way you found a beer that was that perfect. There's no way.
It just came out last week. This
There's
beer's
no.
brand new.
I don't even
Yeah.
know how to process that information right now. God damn.
There's no Brandon book that I thought this was better to bring in.
We might as well
Then
stop the
Calamity.
final draft now. There's never going to be a better entry than that one, right? Holy crap! Well, you picked one that was awesome enough for 2, definitely.
So yeah. So that brings us to the conclusion of our final draft for this week.
Yeah.
And this has been episode 24, if I'm not mistaken.
Is it? I thought it was 25. It's probably 24. You're probably right.
Yeah. So next week we are going to be covering through chapter 25. It's the end of part 2 of Foundry Side by Robert Jackson Bennett. It's a newer fantasy series. Definitely check it out. It's great, great reviews. I'm certainly enjoying it so far. I think all fans of Brandon Sanderson will really, really love this book. So we're going to be doing 2 weeks on Foundry Side, and the first week we'll cover through the end of part 2. If you want early access to that, check out our Patreon. We have some pretty awesome perks in addition to early access to episodes. We have short episodes that are Patreon exclusive, including we just did Mitosis for Reckoners. It's not book 4, it's book 1.5.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as always, I'm your host, Drew McCaffrey. With me is my co-host, Rob Santos.
Yo!
And our special guest, my wife, Lauren McCaffrey.
Thank you so much again, Lauren, for coming on.
Of course.
And we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody!